Carrier USS Ardennes pushed through the Pacific like a leviathan cloaked in steel, her nuclear core humming a steady rhythm beneath decks crowded with 5,000 lives. Most aboard had already fallen into the ship's cadence, the pulse of turbines and hydraulics, the constant low groan of pressure against metal bulkheads. To most sailors, it was background noise. To Sergeant Elena Marlowe, it was a conversation. She lay in her rack in berthing 3C, eyes closed but not truly asleep. At 34, Elena had spent too long listening to the moods of machines to ever turn her ears fully off. Helicopters in the desert had taught her that engines whisper before they scream, that a hairline crack or a misaligned shaft sends a signal only patience can catch. Now she listened to a ship far larger than anything she'd ever touched, trying to decipher its language. Her bunk space was neat to the point of severity. Manuals tucked in a tight row by her pillow. Her duffel squared away with military corners. Even the earplugs softening the constant chatter of the corridor were regulation precise. Every detail suggested someone determined to take up less room than she was allowed. The laughter outside her curtain was harder to ignore. Two sailors, young and loud, their voices carrying the confidence of men who had never been doubted. "Still can't figure out why they stuck an Army wrench turner on a Navy bird," one muttered, his tone pitched just high enough for others to hear. His friend snorted. "Brass needed to check a box. Probably calls the engine room when her laptop freezes." The laughter that followed was sharp and mean, echoing against steel bulkheads. Elena didn't move. She'd heard this before, in the hangars of Kandahar, in the maintenance bays of Kuwait, wherever men gathered to decide who belonged and who didn't. Correcting them only gave them ammunition. So she lay still, the insult sliding off the surface, her mind already elsewhere. Then the ship spoke. A metallic chime rang over the 1MC, followed by the clipped voice of the officer of the deck. "All hands, this is the bridge. Weather reports indicate a rapidly developing storm system off the starboard bow. Department heads, prepare for rough seas. Admiral Hale will address senior staff in 20 minutes. That is all." Elena pulled one earplug free. She pressed her palm against the bulkhead, letting the vibration speak. Beneath the steady thrum of propulsion, something was wrong. A slight irregularity in the portside turbine, a hitch, half a second off rhythm. Too subtle for most, but unmistakable to her. She'd heard it before in Apaches with rushed overhauls, in Chinooks with bearings past their prime. It was the sound of a machine trying to tell the truth before it failed. Her pulse quickened, but she stayed still, counting the beats, mapping the problem in her head. Outside, footsteps thundered down the passageway as sailors prepared for storm protocols. Above, on the bridge, officers were already debating whether to trust computer models or instincts. Elena knew one thing with absolute certainty: the Ardennes was speaking. And nobody with authority was listening. She sat up at last, sliding from her rack with the quiet precision of someone who had learned long ago how to move without drawing notice. Her bare feet touched the non-skid deck, and she felt the vibration more clearly. Wrong. Growing worse. While others braced for the storm outside, Elena Marlowe understood a darker truth. The real threat wasn't on the horizon. It was in the ship's steel heart, thrumming a warning only she could hear. And if she didn't act soon, 5,000 lives would pay the price. The ship lurched hard enough to rattle the racks in berthing 3C. Above, a tray clattered to the deck in the mess, followed by curses in half a dozen languages. Sailors laughed it off, blaming Pacific weather doing Pacific things. Elena Marlowe didn't laugh. She was already moving, slipping through the narrow corridors like she belonged there. She didn't. Not officially. But the Ardennes was speaking, and she couldn't ignore it. Her path took her past Damage Control Central, down 2 ladders, and into the warren of passageways that led to the carrier's mechanical belly. The deeper she went, the stronger the wrongness felt. The vibration was no longer a whisper, it was a tension building in her teeth and bones, an anxious rhythm out of step with the rest of the ship. She found the engineering crew gathered around the main diagnostic panel. Screens painted a picture no one wanted to interpret, oscillations in red and amber, numbers slipping outside their safe zones. Warning lights blinked in accusing patterns. Petty Officer Jared Connolly, barely 23, paced tight circles behind the console, his hands black with grease. His muttering carried desperation. Sensor delay, that's all. Load balancing software's just reacting late. It'll sort itself. They're not fighting sensors. Her voice cut through the compartment like a blade. Heads turned. Some recognized her, the army outsider who haunted the turbine decks. Others just frowned, confused at what an army mechanic was doing in their space. Connolly straightened. "Ma'am," he began cautiously, trying to keep the edge of dismissal out of his tone, "we've got it under control." Elena stepped closer, scanning the display without touching anything. "No, you don't. Ballast Tank 3B is overcompensating for a trim issue that isn't real. The port turbine's running asynchronous, 2, maybe 3% off baseline. The computers think it's a ballast problem, so they're fighting torque imbalance with ballast adjustments." Which means what? Another sailor challenged, arms crossed, trying to mask the fear behind his skepticism. "Which means every wave we take will magnify the harmonic until the hull starts flexing against itself." She met their eyes, steady and calm. "You're not dealing with software. You're dealing with steel." A younger technician frowned. "So, it's just a sync problem?" Elena shook her head, her voice carrying the weight of 12 years in hangars and bays where engines lied on their way to death. "No. It's shaft misalignment. Bearing wear. Something physical. The diagnostics can't see it because the computer's too busy fixing the symptoms. But in this storm, those fixes are killing us." The ship lurched again, harder this time. The lights flickered. Everyone in the compartment grabbed for handholds. Connolly swore under his breath. Elena didn't flinch. She let the vibration roll through her bones, reading it like Braille. "That's what it sounds like when nobody listens," she said quietly. Connolly's voice cracked with disbelief. "You're saying the storm's not the problem?" "The storm's going to expose it," she corrected. "And if you keep trusting software, it'll tear this ship in half." Silence pressed against the steel walls, broken only by the strained hum of turbines fighting themselves. The sailors looked at one another, unwilling to say what they all felt, that the army sergeant's explanation made more sense than their manuals. But sense wasn't the same as authority. Connolly opened his mouth again, but Elena was already moving toward the ladder. Her decision was made. The bridge needed to hear what the machines were screaming before the ocean added its voice. She climbed fast, hand over hand, her boots striking steel rungs in a rhythm that matched the beat of the failing turbine. Above, thunder cracked. The storm was coming in full now. And somewhere in the ship's steel heart, metal whispered its warning. A warning only she had heard. The bridge of the USS Ardennes was a storm in its own right, alarms howling, officers shouting numbers no one trusted, and the wind outside battering the reinforced glass like a living thing. Lieutenant Commander Lucas Brandt had both hands locked white-knuckle on the manual helm. The autopilot had already surrendered, unable to compute courses fast enough against the chaos outside. Sweat trickled down his temple despite the air conditioning blasting overhead. "Course holding," he barked, voice strained. "Wave height exceeding projections by 40%. Adjusting trim." "Don't adjust trim," came Admiral Jonas Hale's quiet reply. His tone, calm and low, cut sharper than any order. Report. Time to storm wall. The operations chief's voice trembled. 20 minutes, sir. Maybe less if wind speeds continue to climb. Brant leaned over the display, stabbing at the console with his stylus. We push through. Running east puts us behind schedule and burns fuel we don't have. Storm's disorganized, better to hit it head-on before it consolidates. Or it drowns us, someone muttered from navigation. Before Hale could respond, the hatch banged open. Elena Marlowe stepped onto the bridge, water dripping from her hair, her boots leaving wet prints on the deck. She hadn't asked permission. She didn't intend to. Every head turned. The bridge crew froze at the sight of an army sergeant breaking into their sanctuary of brass and bars. Brant's eyes narrowed. What the hell is she doing here? But Hale didn't flinch. He regarded her like a man waiting for someone overdue. Sergeant Marlowe, he said evenly. Tell me what I'm not seeing. Elena moved to the central console, ignoring the stairs drilling into her back. The displays were chaos, oscillations climbing, ballast fighting against phantom trim problems, turbines screaming in digital numbers. She read them the way she'd once read a Chinook gearbox seconds before failure. You're fighting the storm with computers, she said. The ship knows what it needs. But your systems are masking the real problem. The port turbines misaligned. Every automated correction is amplifying the harmonic instead of fixing it. The longer you let the software run, the more stress it transfers into the hull. Brant snapped, his voice rising above the storm outside. She's not bridge personnel. She doesn't have clearance to. She's the only one who felt it before the diagnostics did, Hale interrupted softly, his eyes still locked on Elena. She has the con for stability control until we're clear. The words hit the bridge like a thunderclap. Officers stared, mouths half open. A mechanic, an army mechanic, handed control of a carrier the size of a floating city. A commander from Combat Information stepped forward, anger reddening his face. Admiral, with all due respect, this violates. It violates nothing, Hale said, his voice carrying the finality of stone. What violates command is trusting a $1 million diagnostic program over human instinct. She was down there listening while you sat up here watching numbers. Stand down. The CIC officer swallowed his protest, retreating in silence. Elena's fingers danced across the console, overriding automation, rerouting power. Her voice was calm, deliberate, almost surgical. Disengage auto trim. Manual ballast only. Shift port tanks 4%. Stop fighting the roll, let the ship take the wave. Brant stared at her like she was mad. You'll capsize us. The next wave struck before he could finish. The Ardennes tilted, rolling deep into the swell instead of bracing against it. For one impossible heartbeat, it felt like the ship would never right itself. Then, with a groan that reverberated through the hull, the carrier settled. The violent shuddering that had rattled the deck for the last half-hour eased to something almost manageable. Gasps echoed across the bridge. For the first time since the storm closed in, the ship wasn't fighting itself. Outside, the Pacific roared, walls of black water rising like moving mountains, lightning turning night to silver daylight in brutal flashes. But inside, every officer on the bridge turned to the army sergeant at the console, watching her steady hands and steadier eyes. Elena Marlowe didn't look at them. She was listening to the Ardennes, the way she always had, feeling its pulse through the steel beneath her boots, hearing its voice in the language only machines spoke. And for the first time since the storm began, the carrier whispered something other than fear.